If you're a letting agent and you're looking for an MTD solution for your landlords, then this video is going to give you a quick overview of how the software works and what those MTD submissions are going to look like. So we are in the account of a landlord called Mike, and you can see from the properties page here that this is a landlord with 3 properties. And as you add your properties, you will see them appear in your property list below. Now the pictures that look really nice, they just pull in from Google Street View. So you don't need to add those. As you add your properties, they will pull through, and it means your landlords can actually see exactly how much money they are making on their properties. And not just that, it will also keep track of any arrears. But if you're wondering where these figures come from, that comes from the bookkeeping element of Hammock. And for that, we're going to jump across to the transaction page. So here we are in the transaction page, and you can see that Mike is using Hammock through connecting his live bank feed. Now that is how the majority of landlords use Hammock, but it's not the only way you can get transactions in. You can also upload your transactions via a spreadsheet. But either way, once your transactions are in Hammock, they will feed through, and then you can start clicking on them and categorizing them. Now, if we look at Mike's transactions, we can see that we've already categorized a few of these transactions, anything you see with a green category, but you can also see that there are lots of personal transactions in here, like Tesco or Superdrug. That's totally normal in Hammock. We know that a lot of landlords do not have a dedicated bank account for their properties. So the way Hammock works, Hammock assumes that every single transaction is personal, unless you categorize them. So anything that says click to track, that's not feeding anywhere. Anything you categorize will feed through into their profit and loss and their tax submissions for Making Tax Digital. But I want to show you how this process works. So we've got our bank feed connected, and then we've got some filters here so we can start searching for some transactions. And I've got a Sky Broadband transaction here. And obviously I pay that monthly. So if I want to look at all of my Sky Broadband transactions, I can just start searching by keyword, and it will isolate all of my broadband payments here. And if we scroll down, you can see that this landlord has connected their bank feed from the start of the last tax year. So all we need to do now is we just click on any one of these transactions, and then we're just going to categorize it. So the box pops up on the right hand side with all our expense categories. Now you can search for a category at the top, or we could go into utilities and just call this internet, and then link this to the relevant property. So we're going to link that to 141 Corn Street and click save. Now that tracks that first transaction, but obviously we're going to want to track all of these transactions, and that is where this button over here becomes really useful, where it says, do you want to find and track more internet transactions? And if we do, we're going to click search and track, and now suddenly everything has a little tick box. So we can actually just select all of those transactions in one go and update all 12 of them as internet for 141 Corn Street. Now, the beauty of this is, because this is a recurring transaction, now that I've tracked it once, going forward for April onwards, when that transaction hits my bank feed, it will just track itself. I won't need to do anything more for those transactions. And so that's how you deal with your expenses. Now, obviously, when it comes to income, that income value hitting the bank account is going to be the net figure, because you're collecting the rent, you're taking away your fees and possibly other deductions, and it's the net figure that hits the bank feed. So the difference we're going to do here is we're not just going to link the transaction to a property, we're also going to link it to a tenancy. And when you add a tenancy in Hammock, you tell the system how much the rent is, and if you use a letting agent, how much the fee is. So Hammock already knows what that net figure should be. So if I say I've got a tenant called Mary, and Mary pays 1,200 of rent, and I've got my agent called Moving On, and they take 10%, all I need to do is just find that transaction form from my agent, and I'm going to use the date filter this time. So we're going to go back to February. And so this is the payment from my agent from Moving On. So Mary, she's paid her £1,200. The agent's taken their 10%, and this is what I get left with in my bank. But from here, it's the same process we did before. We click on the transaction, box pops up on the right-hand side with our income categories, and we're going to categorize that as rental income. Then we're going to select the property, which is 141 Corn Street, and then we're going to select the tenant. But Hammock already knows, when I created that tenancy for Mary, remember, that the rent is 1,200, the fee is 10%. So Hammock is expecting this amount. So when we track this amount, it doesn't track the entire thing to rent. It splits that transaction automatically into 1,200 of rent and 120 of fees. And just like with that broadband payment, now the system knows what my rent looks like. Any month going forward where I get that regular amount, which is just rent and fees, Hammock will recognize it, it will track it, it will split it. Which means the only times I need to do anything with my agent payments are those months where there is additional deductions. And if we jump forward to March, that is exactly what happened, because in March, I didn't get 1,080. I only got 867 because I had some repairs. So with this one, it won't track itself, but we just do the same process we did before. We click on the transaction, we tell the system that it's a rent payment, we select the property, which is Corn Street, we select the tenant, but this time Hammock recognizes that this is less than the 1,080 it was expecting. And then it asks a really simple question: would you like to create an expense for that difference? Now, obviously I had some repairs, so we're going to say, yes, I would like to create an expense. Then we just pick the category, and there's all kinds of categories, but most of the time it will probably be something within maintenance. Within maintenance, it can be all kinds of things. So it could be a gas, a PAT test. We're going to go with repairs. And it is worth knowing that sometimes, obviously, that £212 could be made up of 2 or more expenses. And if that's the case, just click multiple expenses and they can itemize them as much as they like. But in my case, I'm just going to click save, and then Hammock still splits that for me, but now it splits it into rent, fees, repairs. If the landlord wants to, they can add notes to these transactions. They can also attach those agent statements to the transactions if they want to keep fully digital records. So now if we jump back to the properties page, I want to show you how this feeds through the rest of the platform. So now you've seen how the bookkeeping works, you can now understand where these figures are feeding from. But the important thing to note here, if we scroll up to the top, whilst we've got 3 properties in this account, it's really important to know that whilst this is Mike's account, he's the landlord, these 3 properties actually belong to Mike and his wife, Mary. And they can manage all of these properties within a single account. And not only that, each of these 3 properties has completely different ownership. They've got one property they own 50-50 between them. They've got one that is just in Mike's name and one that is just in Mary's name. And that's still really easy to manage in Hammock, because all you need to do for each different ownership structure you have, you create a portfolio. And then if we scroll down, you can see each property is assigned to a portfolio. And you can probably tell from the names of these which is which, but this joint ownership portfolio I've just set up saying that Mike owns 50% and Mary owns 50%. This portfolio I've said Mike owns 100%. And this one, Mary owns 100%. So Hammock knows that any transactions that are for Corn Street, half of it will go to Mike, half of it will go to Mary. Anything for 25 New Church will just go onto Mike's tax return. Anything for 27 Swallowed to Mary's. And it's not limited to 2 owners. If they had 2 children and they had ownerships as well, we can include that. But what it means is, as long as the landlords are doing their bookkeeping, when they go into their tax area, they will get a different tax statement for every single person who has any ownership of these properties. And these tax statements operate independently. So if one of the owners is in Making Tax Digital this year, but the other one isn't, that's fine. They can connect Mary, for example, and they could leave Mike and just connect that next year or the year after. But if they both need to submit, then they can both submit for Making Tax Digital and comply with the regulation from this single license. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if we go into Mike's tax statement for 25-26, we're just going to click View Details. So now we're in Mike's tax statement, and we are no longer looking at 3 properties here, because Mike doesn't own 3 properties. He owns 1.5 properties. But on the left-hand side, it's going to show him what income sources he needs to submit for Making Tax Digital. And in Mike's case, it's UK property, which we support. We do also support foreign property. On the right-hand side is Mike's obligations. So let's say we wanted to make that Q3 submission for MTD. All we would do is we just click here, Review and Submit. And now we are looking, all the bookkeeping work that's been done means those transactions are feeding through into the correct income and expense categories for HMRC. Now this is the Q3 return, and these updates are cumulative. So this is from the start of the tax year in April up to the end of Q3, the 5th of January. You can see all of the income and expense categories that will be submitted and all of the totals that will be submitted. Any of these are clickable, so they can go in and do a final review here. But this is the only information HMRC receive. They do not see the properties, they do not see the tenancies, they do not see the transactions. They just see the income and expense categories and the totals. And once they're happy, Mike can just click submit quarterly update and submit his tax return. And then if we go back to the tax area, Mary could also log in, go into her tax statement and submit her quarterly update as well. So if you have landlords that you need to get ready for MTD, come and talk to Hammock. We offer both a referral model and a reseller model. So if you want to know more information, please get in touch.